All right, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. It is a tremendous privilege to welcome everyone to this beautiful luncheon. So there's good news and bad news. The good news is that this is going to be a beautiful afternoon together, and the good news is that we get the schos here at the shul to welcome everyone. The bad news is that I am the only thing standing between you and lunch. So, Emir Hashem, we'll try to. I will definitely keep this brief, just to share a few words of Torah. I really want to begin by thanking Leah, Mrs. Engelsberg, Shani Tapper, Aviva, everyone who, and I'm sure there are others who worked so hard to bring this together. We're hoping that Emir Hashem, this could become a regular occurrence within our shul. It's so nice. Just, the best events, we find the best events are the ones that just bring people together. It doesn't really matter what the program is or isn't, but just an opportunity to be together, to just spend time together, to get to know one another. And like I always say at every shul program, if there are people here who you don't know, make sure to take the opportunity to introduce yourself, to give a shalom aleichem, because part of the beauty of a shul is we try to be a family, but it's a big family. So sometimes it's like having third cousins or fourth cousins. I actually just met someone the other week who was actually at the rally in Washington, who is also, his last name is Silber. And it turns out that we're third cousins. Now, he lives a couple of blocks from here. We've been here for 20 years, more than 20 years. And so sometimes you could be very close to someone, but because there's some amount of distance. So same thing in a shul. Sometimes you could be part of a kila, be part of a community, and yet somehow, some way, we don't necessarily always get to meet each other. And the beauty of these, especially like a smaller, more manageable group, is just an opportunity to get to know one another. So welcome, Emir Hashem. It's a great zuchus. Looks like you have quite a spread over here, Emir Hashem. I'm excited for all of you. So just to share with you a little bit of Torah. I was debating, what to speak about. But the truth is, obviously we can always go to the parasha, right? In Bereshis, you could always default to the parasha because there's always great stuff to focus on. But I wanted to actually focus on something a little bit different, which is a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. So you can see the sheet that I have for you over here. We're looking actually at Mishnah 25, Chaf Hey. Chaf Hey. So it's towards the bottom of the page. You can follow in the Hebrew and the English. They're right across from each other. Chaf Hey 25. Elisha ben Avuya Omer. Elisha ben Avuya says, this was the name of the sage. We'll come back to him in just a little bit. Halomed yeled lemahu dome. So literally, let's just use the literal translation. When you learn as a child, what is it like? Lidio ksuva al niyar chadash. Like ink written on clean paper. On the other hand, halomed zakein, if one learns when they are older already, in their old age, what is it like? Lemahu dome. Lidio ksuva al niyar machok. Like ink written, he says blotted, but it really means on erased paper. On erased paper. So if I were to ask you, what is Elisha ben Avuya saying, what would you say? What is he saying?
Your memory is not so good, and you've got life experience behind you, often the learning that you do doesn't stick.
Beautiful. So first of all, even before I expound what Mrs. Ben just said, which is so beautiful, it's important to understand that in the Mishnah, and this helps with the imagery a little bit, in the Mishnah, when it says niyar, we translate niyar as paper. So when I say paper, what do you think? You think this. In Mishnaic literature, niyar is parchment, which helps the imagery of this a little bit more. What Elisha ben Avuya is saying, according to Mrs. Ben, which I think makes absolute sense as a Pashup Pshat, is that a child is like a blank piece of parchment. So if you've ever had the opportunity to see a Sefer Torah being written, you'll notice that parchment does something very interesting, which is it absorbs. Right? Even when you look at a Sefer Torah, the letters are, it looks like they're raised above, right? Because of the way the ink dries, it dries with a little bit of thickness, but the letters are absorbed into the parchment. That's why if you've ever seen where a letter gets erased out, even when a letter is erased out, there's usually some form of the letter left on the parchment. So Elisha ben Avuya compares a child to like a blank piece of parchment. And whatever you write on that piece of parchment gets absorbed into the parchment itself. It's interesting. What does he call, what's the right word here? I was going to say older. We're not going to use older. Mature, right? What does Elisha ben Avuya call a mature person? What does he compare the mature individual to? An erased piece of parchment. If you notice, by the way, can you write on an erased piece of parchment? Can you write? Sure. But there's two issues with a erased piece of parchment, which is So number one, if you ever notice, when you scratch parchment, it doesn't look the same. You could tell worn parchment versus new parchment, right? So when you erase, you can erase parchment, but when you do, it leaves a mark on it. You could write on it, but the mark is clear. Also remember, when you erase parchment, remember what ends up happening is you actually remove a layer of the parchment as well, which means that the ink doesn't absorb as well. And it's an incredible metaphor. And this metaphor is, so Mrs. Ben was highlighting how it can be talking about just the general process of learning. It is easier for children to absorb things, right? It was easier for us to absorb things when we're younger than to absorb things when we get older. So let's talk about that for a little bit. Why is that? So Mrs. Ben mentions it could just be your mental faculties, right? When I'm younger, I've got everything. Well, I think I have everything in order. It turns out, retrospectively, I realized I didn't have anything in order when I was young. But I think I have everything in order. So I'm able to, maybe when I get a little bit older, things become a little bit more difficult. Why else is it more difficult to learn when you're older than when you're younger? You got a lot of other stuff going on, right? This is incredibly important as well. Children, if you ever notice, what's fascinating about children is they can become fixated on something, right? And when they become fixated, you see this even with little children from the time that they're babies, right? And maybe they're in the bouncy chair and they have that ring of toys over it, and they're just staying what are you looking at? You've been looking at the same thing for 25 minutes, right? Because that's the power of children. There's a fixation. And because there's that fixation, they learn differently. As we get older, we're also jaded, cynical. That erased parchment, remember, a lot of us have erased parchment, right? Why do we have erased parchment? Because we've made mistakes, we've had to start over, and you erase the parchment. And it's interesting that sometimes, what's the hardest thing about getting a new start in life? The hardest thing? The change involved with it. And as much as I want a new start, maybe separate and distinct from what was before, it's really hard to totally distance yourself and disconnect from what was before. The parchment is still erased. The parchment is erased. Any other thoughts about this? What else do you think Elisha ben Avuya is trying to say? Right? If you learn as a child, it's like writing on a new piece of parchment. Learning as an adult, it's like an erased piece of parchment. What else could he be conveying? Any other ideas or thoughts?
Writing on a new piece of parchment, like you said, events in so to the parchment. So even if you try to erase it, there's the shiriot that's left over, as opposed to when you're older, when you're more mature, then a lot of the parchment has already been erased and indented.
Incredible. Beautiful. And this, by the way, it's interesting because this cuts both ways. Everything that children experience leaves an indelible impression on them, which we all know, right? One of the most difficult parts of parenting is recognizing that everything I do has an impact on my children, right? Sometimes when people are young parents, they think that it's all about the life lessons you convey to your children. I'm not going to take a show of hands about how many of us remember what our parents said to us, but I would venture to say that all of us remember what our parents did. We remember parental behaviors that we observed inside the home, some hopefully for good, but sometimes not for so good, right? In other words, children absorb everything that they see, and it leaves an imprint on their parchment. It's interesting. Rabbi Avram Pam, who was Rosh Yeshiva of Torah V'das in New York, he used to give. He would be speaking to chasanim, to new grooms, but it was advice that he often gave to husbands. He said that make sure when you leave the house in the morning, take an apple with you. Okay, it doesn't seem like the most sagely piece of advice. So listen to this. He said as follows. He said, you know what happens when you come home after a long day of work? So you walk into the house, and what's the only thing you want to do? What do you want to do? Is eat, right? And when you walk in the house and you're ravenous, what don't you want to do? Talk. See, I knew I could depend on the men for this, right? Talk, right? I do not want to talk. I don't want to talk about my day. I don't want to talk about your day. I don't want to talk about our feelings. I don't want to talk about global hunger. I don't want to talk about anything. I just want to sit down and eat. And Rabbi Palm said something so beautiful. He said that, take the apple with you. That way, before you walk into the house, eat the apple. Now, what is the apple going to do? At least the apple that makes it that you're not going to walk into the house like a ravenous animal. You could be a human being. You could walk in. You could say hello. You could say, how are you? And this is true. He was saying it both in the context of a marriage as well as the context of children. Why? Because when a man or anyone barrels into the house, doesn't exchange proper greetings, doesn't have proper derech eretz, and just sits down because he's starving, right? He's been working hard the whole day, it leaves an imprint. It leaves an impression. So Elisha ben Avuya is saying that all the things that we experience as children leaves an imprint on our parchment. Now, interestingly enough, as adults, one of the things we have to try to master is, what do I try to master as an adult? Letting things slide. Letting things slide. There are people who let nothing slide. Right? They remember every grievance. They remember every slight. They remember everything. They remember everything. And the truth is, if you really take it down a level, it's childish behavior. That's what children do. Children, everything bothers them, right? Everything is remembered. Everything has an impact on the parchment. Part of what distinguishes adults from children is that adults are supposed to have the mechanism to let things slide. Okay, I don't like what you said. I don't like what you did. Okay, it's not going to ruin my life. I'm not going to allow my whole day to be shattered because I had a negative interaction. It's about compartmentalizing and recognizing, okay, I'm not happy with this, but I'm not allowing it to impact me going forward. A child's parchment is new and everything imprints. An adult has to be a bit more sophisticated and know what are you going to let on your parchment and what are you not going to let on your parchment. A beautiful teaching. What's the problem with the Mishnah? What's the problem? Right? So we're sitting here learning this Mishnah. It's beautiful. Well, you look at this. What bothers you about this? Or what's maybe a little bit troubling about this? So how do we learn? Good, excellent. We're going to come to that in just a moment. Excellent. What else? Oh, excellent. Shrafaim was right. You know, this Mishnah is great if you're learning it when you're 15. Right? In fact, great. Okay, I got it. I'm young or a child, so it's great. My parchment is clean. I can figure out. What do I do if I'm an adult? So my parchment is erased. And my parchment has been erased multiple times. So you read a Mishnah like this, and I don't know, I read it, and I'm like, this Mishnah does not make me feel good. This Mishnah seems like a tremendous downer, because what essentially it's saying is, I'm a person with erased parchment, which almost already seems to mean that like I am approaching life like at a deficit. You know, I'm approaching life already again with a handicap, with a life handicap. In other words, I'm already disadvantaged, which is strange. And truth is like sad, a little bit depressing, a little bit hurtful. So, granted, if you're learning this Mishnah as a 5-year-old, it's the best thing in the world because you realize, oh my gosh, not that a 5-year-old appreciates his blank canvas, his tabla rasa, his clean piece of parchment, but what I do with this as an adult. And I'll tell you something beautiful. The Sfas Emes, the Ger Rebbe, with this I'll conclude. The Ger Rebbe says something so beautiful. He says that when we often have a viewed conception of time, and he says we view time as a linear progression, right? So I'm born, and then again, I gradually get older until one day life comes to an end, right? And so every day, I'm a little bit older than the day before. That's how we view time, as a linear progression. Sfas Emes says that's not really the right way to view time. The better way to view time is that every day is a lifetime in and of itself. Meaning what? When I wake up in the morning and I say Moda'ani, we know what you should say to yourself right after Moda'ani? Give yourself a Mazel Tov. What do you give yourself a Mazel Tov on? Rebirth. You survived the day, but not only did I survive, a rebirth. A rebirth. Mazel Tov. I have just been reborn, right? We know not everybody is zocheh to open their eyes every morning. So if I woke up, I opened my eyes this morning, Mazel Tov, a rebirth for me. A rebirth. And the Sfas Emes says, then what happens? As the day goes on a little bit, so mid-morning, I'm in my teens. By midday, I don't know, maybe 30s. And as the day progresses, I get older and older and older to the point that when nightfall comes, it's 120, right? 120. Because every day represents a unit of life that begins with untold possibilities, but then when it's over, right? We all know this. The one thing you can never reclaim in life is time. So it's an incredible way to look at time. So therefore, every single morning, I'm a yeled. Every single morning when I get up, I am a brand new person. But just understand, there's going to be an accelerated lifetime, because comes Sesach Kochavim, comes nightfall, and the day is over. That's 120. You'll excuse me for saying this. Baruch Daina Emes. That's it. Baruch Daina Emes on what? The day. This day is done. Right? That was Tuesday of blessed memory. Right? So Tuesday of blessed memory, right? Or as they say in Baltimore, Allahu Shalom, right? So so in Baltimore, right? So that day is over. That day is over. There's nothing more to talk about with that. It's done. It's done. And what a different way to view time. So what that means is the Sasemis is every day I'm a yeled. Every day, you see, our greatest challenge in life is because we look at time as continuum, we just look at today as a continuation of yesterday. And so here's the problem with that. Now, if yesterday was excellent, and I really did everything I'm supposed to do, then fantastic. I want today to be an extension of that. But a lot of times for us, yesterday had its ups and downs, had its good moments and its bad moments, its peaks and valleys. And so a lot of times, if I just view today as an extension of yesterday, I'm already operating at a deficit. I'm already compromised. I'm already that erased parchment. But the Sasem says the most important thing to realize is when you wake up in the morning, every morning, you are that clean piece of parchment. But what about yesterday? I often say the three best words found in the Gemara. The Gemara has an expression. Three best words in all of Shas. Mai dahava hava. What was. What was. And that adage has many different formulations. Don't cry over spilled milk. You can't change the past. Mai dahava hava. Again, do I have to be a retrospective individual and think about the past? Of course I do. But I also can't live in the past. Sometimes I just have to say, I woke up this morning, Mazel Tov, I'm a yeled. For today, I have a clean parchment. And I've got one day now to work on this parchment. Now, the beautiful part is every day, you get a brand new parchment. Every day, you get a clean slate. Every day, you get to start again. But only if you view time, each day, as its own incremental unit of time. And this, to me, is one of the most beautiful things. So suddenly now this Mishnah is not just for the young. This Mishnah is for all of us, for young, right? The young at heart, right? And this Mishnah says, every day you wake up, give yourself a mazel tov, brand new day, brand new birth, brand new piece of parchment. What do you want to do with it? And think about this for just a moment. Imagine going through the day and asking yourself, what do I want to write on my parchment? Right? Imagine if you have a brand. I always tell, when a couple gets married, so the one thing that you will never find underneath the chuppah, one thing you'll never find underneath the chuppah, anyone know? Never find underneath the chuppah? Take a guess. Never find it underneath the chuppah. A will, right? That is true. Right? Solid answer, right? Right? What you never find in the chuppah is red wine, right? Why will you never find red wine under a chuppah? Because the kala is wearing a white dress. You would be crazy to bring a glass of red wine anywhere near the kala. Why? Because on a beautiful white wedding gown, right, even a drop of red wine is going to show up. That, every day when we wake up, that brand new piece of parchment, that's like a brand new gown. So we'll have to find some male equivalent of that, whatever it is, a brand new white shirt. It's this tabula rasa, it's this brand new piece of parchment. And my avoda going through the day is to try to ask myself, what do I want to write on the parchment and what don't I want to write on the parchment? Or what events do I want to imprint on this parchment and what don't I want to? So imagine for a moment, the next time you have a negative interaction, which inevitably is going to occur, a person has to ask themselves, okay, what do I want to do with this? Do I want to allow this to penetrate inside me, to become part of who I am, to carry on this anger, animosity? Do I want that negativity to imprint on my parchment or not? And that's your decision. Same way, again, if I'm about to engage in a particular behavior, I'm going to do something now, right? And my actions are imprinted on my parchment. Do I want them to imprint? Don't I want them to imprint? That's the gift that Elisha ben Avuya says we have each and every day. We wake up, Mazel Tov, and I'm a yeled. I'm a child with a brand new piece of parchment. And it is up to us to decide what to do with that daily gift and how to maximize it to the best of our ability. And after 120, what does Chesed Baruch Hu do? How are we judged? he collects all of the parchments from all of the days of my life. And he says, no, let's review. Let's go through what you wrote on all of the parchments, how you lived on all of the parchments. So again, Elisha ben Avuya comes today, joins us at the luncheon, and inspires us, Emirat Hashem, to take advantage of the daily parchments, to make sure that we're only being attentive to the things that really matter, trying to block out the things that will only slow us down, and making sure that we fill our daily parchment with holiness, with beauty, and with incredible connection. Welcome. Really, it's such a pleasure and a privilege to have all of you here. I'm sorry for taking up time between your lunch. Enjoy your lunch today. I look forward to seeing you in future events as well. Welcome, everyone.